I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my blog, where it's both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you, giving you a specific takeaway, all so that way your journey can be at least a little bit easier. Before I fully dive into things, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, let's get into this past week. A lot of stuff going on, right? I did an episode last week, if you haven't caught it, just how we can't separate ourselves from the humanity of things. And by that, I don't mean just kind of what's going on in Ukraine, because, there's, of course, multiple things happening all at once. There's the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, right? That is still an ongoing thing, as well as, things within our own home country and so forth. And the reason, I think I talked a lot about that, how art has a place within the world, and, art helps shape the world. It holds up a mirror to the world, and not that every piece of art has to be political in that way. Just having something like, let's say, like a rom-com that's easy breezy for all intents and purposes, it gives us something to aspire to within our society, right? So that's the summation of what I talked a lot about last week. And one of the things, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that side of things because, a lot of my thoughts are covered there. And quite frankly, as far as anything happening within the world, there's far better sources than me to listen to, right? Certainly, for me, I really appreciate Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar and various other sort of, podcasts dissecting things and whatever else. Also, I would encourage you to, for me, I'm following on Twitter various Ukrainian journalists, so I get more of a direct source as to what's happening and things of that nature. So, there's ways to stay informed, and not when it comes to that side of things. You should not be coming to me for sources, But the one thing I do want to kind of discuss, last week there was the State of the Union, and the one thing that I'm going to kind of break down, because I don't want to make this, an analytical show in that sense of just the State of the Union, but the part about Russia in particular reminded me a lot of the scene in The Big Short. Specifically, if you're unfamiliar, there's a scene with Brad Pitt. He's like this kind of investor, hedge fund-esque guy, or used to be, and now he's out of the game, but these two guys, young guys, need his help in order to place bets essentially against the housing market. Hence why it's called The Big Short. They want to bet against the housing market because they know the inevitable is going to happen. And doing so will earn them, millions upon millions of dollars. And so they do this, and, the two young guys, they're dancing. They're like, hell yeah, yes, we did it. And Brad Pitt stops them. He's like, don't effing dance. Don't dance. And they're like, what? We just, we're feeling good. We're going to make a lot of money. And he basically gives this really impassioned speech about, why he hates the banking system because it reduces people down to numbers. And then he gives them a statistic of I forget exactly what it is, but it basically, just if 1% of the stock or something like that goes down, 40,000 people end up homeless or something to that effect. Don't quote me on that, but it's something pretty egregious in that vein. And so he says, listen, you did what you needed to do, but don't dance. And what that means to me is don't gloat. Do what you got to do, but don't gloat. And so when I look at kind of the sanctions and what's happening, yes, I'm not going to argue whether they're needed or not, but I will say, just don't gloat, because then that's only going to create resentment in general. Because, a natural byproduct of any sanctions is that like all things, the poorest people end up suffering the most. And so that's why I don't gloat. And it felt, not that it was like a, scene from 300, chest pounding and stuff like that, but it felt very much like us versus them again, and like, yay, look at what we're doing, and pride. And that rubbed me the wrong way, if I'm being quite honest. So I didn't appreciate that. So there's that. I'm just giving my dog a toy, if you're watching on video, because otherwise she'll chew stuff that I don't want her to chew. Okay, so there's that. The other thing that I want to talk about is just refugees in general. And, yes, there's a very big double standard of basically white refugees versus any other refugees. And they're both refugees. The white refugees get welcomed in with open arms. The others do not, right? And that in many ways has to change, right? And also from the perspective of just us as a nation, right? Whatever happens in the world, we can sort of, the idea is America can be an example. And all this stuff about standing for Ukraine and things like that, and even like European countries have done this, where, I stand with Ukraine and things like that. But the question becomes, are you going to be willing to stand with Ukraine or whatever other country, right? This applies to anything. When those refugees need a place within your country, right? And most of the time, that does not end up being the case, right? We resent refugees as if it's their fault for fleeing their country and coming into ours. And the fact of the matter is, no one ultimately wants to flee their country. Right? I don't care where you're from. Like, that's the place you know, and as horrific as it may seem to anyone else, you don't want to leave your country. And so we have to have grace and ultimately humanity for refugees, and really rethink how we help those people, because it's too easy to be on the sidelines of I stand with X, Y, and Z, but then when the real test of actually being able to do something about it happens, quite frankly, there's, a lot of people that we shut off our borders to them, and we're okay with that. We applaud it because we don't want to deal with it. And so I'm not saying every problem is an American problem in that sense, but, or just the world's, but again, shaping the world for what we want. Just that sort of humanity of it all, right? And really consider things a little bit more carefully, especially when we're afforded that ability for the most part, because let's be honest, me being able to tape this and you being able to listen to this is a sign that our lives aren't that bad at all, right? Whatever may be happening, our lives are not that bad, ultimately. And it doesn't mean we have to feel shame for that, but, what are the ways we can help, right? And the little things multiplied by many people across time can yield great results, right? And yeah, just kind of on the subject of this, there's an incredible movie called Come and See, made by a former Soviet director. I'm pretty sure it was the only movie he ever made, because he essentially, he knew what he wanted to say, and he did it. And it's an incredible movie that, it's like one of the, regarded as the biggest and best anti-war movie ever. And it's quite interesting. So I'm not going to spoil it in any sense. It's about 2.5 hours, but it is beautiful. And it's called Come and See. It's available on the Criterion Collection. And it just kind of popped into my head as I was talking about all of this. So it wasn't on the official agenda of things that I wanted to necessarily talk about. But it's a hard movie to watch. So if you're not ready for it, please here's your warning. But if you're okay going deep and dark, and can stomach the true realities of war, like that is a movie. That is a movie. Anyway, doing essentially a 180 from that, going into completely lighthearted topics of what I've been up to creatively. I had a test screening of my film this past Friday with very just close friends and family. I've been essentially siloed off for months now working on this and so forth. And so I wanted to, see where people stood with things. And it was great. It was amazing. It was just a fun time to see my friends and family, or not family, but they feel like family sometimes, right? But to be able to see people who I've not seen in a while and just have a meal and sit down and watch it and kind of show them what I've been up to, right? And it's amazing how much fun they had with it. And granted, they're my friends, right? So they were always going to be rooting for me. But I think we don't give that enough credit, because it's like, at the end of the day, if your friends aren't going to be rooting for you, then what have you got, right? Like, it's such a lonely path, really, to be a creative, that like little, when it just feels good when your friends are supporting you, right? So there was that, but also just in general, as we're watching the movie, I was in awe of how fun and funny it really was, and how much fun they had with it. And it's hard to fake that, for anyone, because I was watching them in those moments of really reacting and how they were perceiving everything and really interacting with the movie. And like I said, it'd be very difficult to put on this sort of brave face of I'm enjoying it, right? Like I've been to screenings where you just know the movie that you're presenting is shit, but you need feedback, and the people watching it are not enjoying it at all. They're confused, they're bored, or whatever else. And this was not the case. And I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but overall, the fact that even in its current form, they were able to enjoy it, that was great. And that was kind of a thing going into it mentally for me. I was like, how much do I... they all knew that this was going to be a rough cut and it's not the complete thing. But I was debating how much do I front load it, in the sense of hey guys, the sound is very rough, obviously. There's no color correction. There's the score is temp, and there's parts where literally I recorded my voice to slot in for various parts that we didn't have recorded, and so in that regard, I was just like, you know what? They know it, and let me just make this experience as much as about watching a movie on a Friday night as possible. And so what I even did, I played I downloaded the AMC kind of pre-show thing, and then I showed a trailer of my first movie, right? And then you have the welcome to AMC, don't text and whatever, and then you have the Nicole Kidman little promo, and then you start the movie. And all in all, that ended up being about 4 minutes out of the viewing experience. But just it's just this perceived notion, it put people like they were actually watching a movie, right? That as much as I could, that's what I wanted to put for them, and so that was good. They really enjoyed that, and it set the tone in that way, and I didn't have to do this whole preamble of, please forgive this and please forgive that. No, just watch the movie as is, and if you can enjoy it in that current state, then we're onto something, and they did, right? So that was the great thing about it, and it was really encouraging how funny it really was. Of course you write certain things and you write them because you're having fun with it, but then to see that sort of reaction in the moment was fantastic. The trick of it now, as I show it to, just people that I trust, it's very interesting because it's a good thing because I'm not getting notes about story in the sense of like it's confusing, it drags, I don't like this character, like none of that stuff that is, sometimes that you do deal with, right? And this is more about like nitpicky of like, hey, maybe this scene played on too long, maybe this scene didn't play, was a little bit too quick, or like I would like to see more of this. And so I'm in a high class problem where a lot of the notes are pretty much conflicting. Like it's basically like half the contingency will say, scene one, whatever, let's call it scene one, dragged a little bit. And the other half will say scene one was too fast, you can slow it down. And it's like, okay, that seems very conflicting, right? And obviously I don't have enough of a large enough sample size and whatever to make that determination. But, you do these test screenings and the point is that, if there's just a consistent problem, you address those, right? Because it's a thing, right? It keeps getting raised. And, then you hear out everyone else and you make a determination of, is this a note I want to chase or not? And for the most part, like I was talking with my friend Jeff Graham, you try to entertain everything, right? You don't dismiss it like, hey, let's just see what this would lead to. You have that play. And so, I'm gonna try out the various things and see what fits. But ultimately, like what's interesting is because I'm at this phase of it, the fact that it's working overall, I've also been in this position, like you just take out one domino and the whole thing doesn't work or whatever. And so, or like, you try to fix one thing and introduces 50 other problems, like whatever the case may be. So you do have to be very careful with how you go about these things. Because it's unfortunately, it's not an exact science, right? It's art. It's all very subjective, and not all art is going to be for everybody, right? And so you just try to have the most consensus that you can and find the audience out there that is going to enjoy your movie, right? I love blockbusters, don't get me wrong, but I also love movies that are so niche and whatnot. And I also know that they're quite popular among a certain fan base, but, they just aren't going to play for weeks on end in the movies or something like that, right? So you have to kind of keep those things in mind. And ultimately for me, a big aspect of it is someone might make a suggestion and things like that. And, I can look at that and be like, okay, I get where they're coming from. And what's the core of because a lot of times, like when someone says something, you want to go, okay, you want to hear it and see what is that note really about, right? It's almost like in storytelling, right? There's what we say, and then there's a subtext of what we actually mean. And so I say that because, I know the layers and the intertwining of it all. And if I literally like just chase that note, then it would unravel quite a bit, right? It would introduce 50 more problems. But so instead it's like, okay, what's that note really about and how do I fix the root of the issue as opposed to just the symptom, right? So kind of looking at it like that. And, so in that sense, in a way I have to kind of take a leap on myself. I had this vision from the start of what this could be. And, while, everyone was always very enthusiastic and stuff like that, but yes, people had kind of questions throughout, and rightfully so. And so in that way, all I really did was help steer the ship and help guide everyone to, ultimately where I was navigating towards, right? Like I knew where we were going, and as we're, getting to this final piece, it's not like, we took a wrong turn here and there, but ultimately we're getting to where we need to be. And so now it's just, fully seeing, okay, what else? What are the minor adjustments that we need to make? And I kind of have to continue that, and continue plotting that course and ultimately, just taking that shot on myself. In an ideal world, right now the movie is about 100 minutes. Quite literally 100 minutes, so an hour and 40. In my perfect scenario, it'd be like 95 to 97. But, I was talking with somebody else, and it's like, well, that used to be a lot more important. But in the days of streaming, if the movie wants to be 100 minutes, then maybe that's what it is. And I'm going to try to like get it down to like 97. I mean, once you get to like, this is a pretty tight version, really, overall, right? Even in spite of all the notes, like, none of the notes have come back in and been like, even if I took out the scenes that people suggested, right? Because there's not a lot of them. It would only get me like 40 seconds, it would cut out 40 seconds. So that's the interesting part. We're not talking a lot. So to cut out 3 minutes, that's quite an overhaul. You're not doing that by what we call frame fucking, which is basically just small trims here and there. You're doing that because you just lift something completely out of it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, the fabric of the movie then, starts to get a little bit unraveled, and I don't want to do. So I have to be very conscious of how I go about it. The other aspect that I was kind of thinking about, so I saw The Batman recently, and without spoiling anything, and without doing an in-depth review, I look at that and I'm like, you had 3 hours and you didn't complete a story. You just didn't, and in that sense, it's interesting, like, the craft shines on all levels except for story, and they had a $200 million budget, whereas we did it for pennies. And not that I want art to be graded on a scale, but it's so interesting to me how oftentimes we just push down indie stuff because of its shortcomings, when it's just a miracle that any of the stuff that got made. And I'm not just talking about movies. It could be books. It could be music. Anything of that nature. Photography, like whatever else, right? When you're doing something that's like, I won't call it a hobby because you're putting in the time and the effort, but when it's not your primary source of income, and you're having to do it essentially on the side, and you lack the resources, whether equipment wise, financially, certainly, time wise as well, that to pull off any of it is a miracle. And then I look at like I said, the Batman, and I'm not just the Batman, but just in general, this idea you have these movies that pretty much, for all intents and purposes, have all the resources in the world, and still don't, but it's interesting to me how we're much more like critical of indie stuff and its shortcomings than anything else. So, and I don't know what the solution is. Like I said, it's not like I want art to be graded on a scale. I don't think it can be graded on a scale. I do think, the cream does rise to the top, sort of thing. But yeah, I don't, it just got me thinking in that way. And I don't know, maybe it's just like a sense of pride at knowing what we pulled off for essentially next to nothing. I mean, I'll crunch the fraction later of, what our budget was compared to a $200 million budget, right? I mean, it's not even 1%. It's like, a fraction of a fraction of a percent, really. And I'm damn proud of what we pulled off. So that's exciting. And, the reason I did this test screen was I wanted to get some sort of last minute notes before submission to the Cannes Film Festival. I would love to have like another week, and, like this deadline, not that it like came up on us unexpected, but certainly it's just one of those things. I just wish we had more time on all fronts, but deadline's a deadline, and the Cannes Film Festival is my dream festival, and though it's a long shot regardless, even if we had like the movie completed, you at the same time don't get accepted for anything if you don't apply. And so I was like, all right, well, let's just go for, like, they either see the merit that's there already in spite of, like, yes, it's not complete, but it's normal to send a working copy of the film, and they either like what's there or they were never going to, right? That's sort of my take on it. And so it'll be interesting to see the feedback. And the tough part is I don't know when you get a response. Like the festival itself is like, I believe like it starts on May 17th. So we would have to have the movie completed by then if we got in. And, so right now, a couple of things. We're acting as if we got into the festival, right? Because if we do get the news that, hey, we're in, we want to be prepared for it. And fortunately, again, it would be amazing if we just had like 2 more weeks. Like if the festival was like at the end of May, it would be amazing, right? But, if you get the good news that you're in the Cannes Film Festival, by hell or high water, you make it happen, right? And that's what I told everybody. Like, let's keep working on this. We'll do, we won't like just go balls to the wall quite yet, but let's keep working as if this is the deadline. And if we find out that we're in, then we're in the Cannes Film Festival. Game's on at that point. Like whatever we got to do. And I'm talking, not that I want to spend like recklessly or whatever else, but like we'll figure out a way. Like if we got to throw some money at the problem to get it done, and whatever else, like get some more people involved and so forth. Like you don't not go to the Cannes Film Festival because you couldn't deliver your movie, right? Especially when like we're this close, essentially, like, I mean, or in theory we'd be off by like a week, if 2 weeks was what we need more of, then it's like, all right, how do we make up for that? How do we find the resources to, speed this along so we make that deadline, right? And that's the idea. Or conversely, if we don't get in, then it's like, all right, we can ease off the gas pedal and take our time, get some breathing room, and take the time to get it to where it needs to be, right? So that's kind of the mentality we're going with. The interesting part is, the Cannes Film Festival, for a feature film, you need a physical submission. So a DVD, a Betacam, HD cam, a digital cinema package, things of that nature, a Blu-ray. So I've chosen to make a DVD because A, it's the cheapest, and B, I have a DVD burner, right? I don't have a Blu-ray burner. And plus, even when you send the Blu-ray, you also have to send a DVD. Anyway, so that's kind of what I've decided to do. And it's interesting because A, I haven't basically burned a DVD in almost a decade. So, and a lot of the programs, like Adobe had this great software called Encore, no longer in existence. So I had to find alternatives to create this DVD. And also at the same time, just talking about like having a little bit more time, it's, the deadline itself, it's like the DVD has to get there by that date. It's not like I can postmark it by that date. It has to arrive by that point. So making sure that's all buttoned up and taken care of. So doing that, and like I said, hopefully, like if what they see, they're enjoying. I don't think the stuff that we're talking about was going to be the make or break of it, in terms of their decision to accept it or not. So we'll see. The other aspect of things, I just wanted to kind of mention this because I think it's really cool. There's a lot of people that I've known within this industry, and I'm really starting to see them come into their own. And it's amazing to have like witnessed essentially, or at least, from the periphery, their journey, right? And especially because I know the naysayers along the way, essentially. And, not just like from afar and like distance, like there are people that I personally know that have like tried to deter some of these people and saying like they're fools, that's stupid, that'll never work. And they were unwavering, and now they're reaping the rewards. And it's amazing to really get to see that and be inspired by that. And I hope, certain people have told me I'm kind of something like that for them. And, whether or not, if I am, that's great. That's not why I do it ultimately, but ultimately we all gotta just like uplift each other and take inspiration from each other, because it's a long and often, many times lonely road because I tell people all the time, like, I'll say like, yeah, I've been working on this book, or, I'm working on this movie that we shot in Colombia, and people are like, oh, that sounds so amazing, whatever. I'm like, well, if it sounds so amazing, you'd probably be doing it, because the reality of it is, like, yeah, there's exciting, like the test screen was exciting and filming it was exciting, but just in general, A, it's also a lot of stress, and B, most of the time it's just me siloed off by myself and trying to make things work, and that's the unglamorous side. No different than like entrepreneurship, really, or anything worth pursuing in life. Like it's the stuff that we see of even just Instagram influencers or whoever. That's the tip of the iceberg, but the work that really goes into the culmination of things, it's a lot. It's a lot, and so whatever your passion is, don't be deterred. Ultimately, is the point. And that's what I have for you today in this vlog. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. And as always, if you have any thoughts or questions about anything that I talked about, or things you want to hear me talk about in the future, comment down below or hit me up on social media at Phil Svitek. Likewise, if you have specific questions and think I could be of benefit to you, my Patreon page at patreon.com/PhilSvitek is a chance and an opportunity for us to connect on a more direct level. And so, if that's of interest to you, by all means, go right ahead. Likewise, I talk about my art in these vlogs. Well, I published and output some of this stuff, so, you can check out my books, you can check out my first movie. It's all in the description box. Supporting that stuff helps just support this in general, because, by getting to do that, I can relay my experiences and lessons and, help you out, right? So it all is ultimately symbiotic. So if you're curious to check those out and want to support me, I encourage you to do so. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and hope to see you next time.